It all began with her, that lone sea-wing. She is the matriarch of the empire, the Queen of Pareena, the mother to all imperators who came after her. Open up any history scroll, and any history book, and you'll find her name mentioned somewhere. She is the first Empress. Hi, I'm your host Heatwave, and in today's lore episode, I'll be exploring the very first Empress, Empress Ocean. You think you have won. Your empire will crumble around you as mine has. When we meet again in the after, you'll have to tell me, little sea-wing princess, what was it like to see your dream ripped limb from limb? Welcome back to the Wings of Fire spin-off series, Empire of Pareena. If you haven't done so already, please leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe so you don't miss any episodes that I publish. The first Empress, Empress Ocean, Princess Oceana of the Sea Wings. Whatever way her name is written in the history books, it still means the same thing. Empress Ocean is by far the most important dragon who has ever lived in the Empire of Pareena. She was the benchmark that all dragons could look up and aspire to be. Selfless, compassionate, thoughtful, yet righteous. Single-handedly, she united dragons of multiple winglets to combat a common enemy. Her exploits are legend. Her will is eternal. But where did our glorious first Empress begin her life? Well, born in the Coral City, originally as Princess Oceana of the Sea Wings, she just preferred to be called Ocean. As heir to the Sea Wing throne, Ocean lived an early life of vast privileges. She was the Sea Wing Princess, after all. She got whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted it. This led to a newfound sense of arrogance to the young princess, something that was tempered by her grandfather, an elder sea-wing named Naval. This is where Ocean's life was forcefully pulled in two directions. Her grandfather Naval believed in strength, something exemplified by Ocean's grandmother. The former Queen of the Sea Wings, Queen Barracuda, ruled with an iron fist. She believed that to protect her kingdom, the Sea Wings need the ability to strike out in a show of force, not wait around with their heads in the sand. Naval attempted to teach this to Ocean, while Ocean's mother, the current Sea Wing Queen, Queen Tidalwave, believed the opposite. They were sea wings. They didn't need to live on the surface and make themselves an easy target to the other kingdoms of Pareena. They could just slip into the sea where no one will find them. No one will bother them. Of course, Queen Tidalwave and her father didn't see eye to eye, and Ocean was caught up in the middle of their perspectives. Due to the fact Ocean was, of course, a princess, the bulk of her childhood was learning how to rule her new kingdom. Note, I said rule, not run. By landmass, the Sea Wing Kingdom encompasses all of the Tail Islands, but not every island is inhabited. The smaller communities on these islands are known to act independently from the Coral City. Ocean didn't have time for toys, fun activities, or any real friends, so she gravitated towards her grandfather, the only dragon who seemed to have time for her. He told Ocean the folk tales of the Sea Wings, grand stories of mighty heroes, casting down sea monsters and creatures for the good of all Sea Wings. Stories like the Slayer of the Kraken, the Feast of the Mastodon, the Coral War, and the Turtle Rider. These tales, passed down from generation to generation, may not all be that true, but they are still an important part of Seawing culture. Princess Ocean was enthralled by these stories, and she was inspired to become one. She could imagine herself as a tale told to dragonets who come after her. Her name forever will be immortalized. Already, not many sea wings in the outermost reaches of the kingdom even knew the name of the current Sea Wing Queen. Ocean wasn't going to let her name be the death of her legacy. And who better to influence her young ego than her dear old grandfather? He personally began to educate Ocean on the finer arts of combat and military, of course, in secret from the gaze of Queen Tidalwave. He made Ocean practice basic fighting techniques and how to understand the grand scale of warfare, using the Sea Wing Royal Guard as mock soldiers. This was where Ocean formed a bond with Typhoon. Typhoon is the leader of the Sea Wing Royal Guard. While the Tyrant had his legions, the Sea Wings had some of the best individual bodyguards in Pareena. But they were just bodyguards. But their large numbers indicated they were used more as a paramilitary group. Typhoon was loyal to the throne above anything else. He was a deadly fighter and vowed to follow the princess as her guardian, no matter the moment. Of course, eventually, Typhoon would go on to become the very first Lord Custodii. Ocean wasn't that good of a fighter. Unfortunately, she was full of ego and pride. She attacked as if she was invincible, and it would almost always end with her on her back, sprawled out across the beach. Remember, Ocean was very young at the start of the War of Unification. Most scholars say she was around 9 or 10. Barely an adult, so her lack of skill can be excused. Eventually, news arrived from the mainland. A war had broken out among the Sandwings and a few of the other winglets. To Naval, this was what he had been preparing Ocean for all this time. Except Queen Tidalwave had no opinion on the matter. She didn't care what was happening on the mainland. After all, they were sea wings. They could just dive underwater. No army, no matter how big, could follow them down. They could live undisturbed forever. So what if a few sea wing communities on the islands got butchered? It's a price the Queen was willing to pay. This didn't sit well with Ocean. How could her mother be willing to sacrifice her own kingdom to live comfortably with her pearls and her 12 boyfriends under the sea? Ocean felt horrified at what history will remember her as. If she allowed this, she would be known as Ocean the Betrayer. Imagine if she actually wanted to make a positive change in the Sea Wing Kingdom as queen. Her subjects would just remind her of these atrocities that she didn't stop. Like, hey, that's nice, Queen Ocean, but remember when you let all those sea wings die, you sushi-eating asshole? Ocean wasn't going to let her name be tarnished by this. So, while Naval and Tidal Wave argued about their course of action, Ocean confided in Typhoon, a dragon of little words, yet heavy actions, and he wanted to fight. Many of the dragons in the know want to fight. It won't be long till the war reaches their lands. Many sea wings will die, as the royal guard can't fight a prolonged campaign, even on their own territory. Ocean and Typhoon scoured the kingdom for anyone willing to fight. Royal guards, administration staff, and just anyone dumb enough to follow Ocean into the fires of war. All were needed, all volunteered. It was a meager, untrained force, while Ocean's ego thought this ragtag group was battle-ready. She was certainly going to lead them all to their untimely deaths. Queen Tidal Wave found out quickly what her daughter was up to, because her more loyal sea wings informed her of random theft of tribute, or some dragons just up and leaving their posts without explanation. Tidal Wave wouldn't let her daughter go, though. It wasn't their war, it wasn't their duty to care. Ocean pleaded with her mother. If her namesake was to be saved for history, she couldn't let her kingdom burn. Tidal Wave laughed at Ocean. All this to be a silly storybook hero. Fine. The Queen let her go. It most certainly will end with her daughter's death, which Tidal Wave could live with at least. But there was one condition. Ocean was never to return to the Seawing Kingdom, and she was stripped of her title. She was a princess, no more. Cast out, cast away, Ocean and those loyal to her would travel to the mainland under the cover of a storm. Typhoon suggested that, as it would cover their approach to the mainland of Pareena. In the rain and the wind, there stood a massive female, brown in scale and covered in scars. This was Ocean's new ally. And of course, it was Cinnamon. Cinnamon brought with her supplies, soldiers, and the know-how to conduct war. And she looked down on Ocean. Typhoon didn't exactly trust Cinnamon either. She was once a part of the Sandwing Kingdom. How could she, oh so conveniently, defect to this new random group of sea wings? Ocean was able to see the bigger picture, though, and acted as a moderator. She convinced Typhoon that these new allies are worth their trust. If they wanted the Sea Wings dead, they would have already slit their throats. But Ocean believed in Typhoon. She had trusted him a lot longer than this random hybrid. She made him the primary military commander, with Cinnamon in charge of logistics, which she agreed with the appointment. Cinnamon, though, still had her doubts. Ocean still wore her ego as a fashion statement. The young Sea Wing had no clue what she was walking into. With Ocean's loyalists growing in size every day, as Ocean herself convinced many random dragons she found on her way to join. Their goal was to march on the Mojave, take the fight to the Sandwings. It would be easy. With the Tyrant's Legion at war on Claw Mountain, there wouldn't be much resistance to handle. Until Ocean learnt exactly what this war was about. In the lower valley, in the shadow of Claw Mountain, there was, well, what was left of a small village. Large domes of black rock lay smouldering and broken. Ocean felt sick. A winglet she had never seen before lay dead and crushed, their eggs smashed, their elders gutted. Not even the hatchlings were spared. And the females? Gone. Taken. Probably to have an even worse fate. This was war. Ocean couldn't process who or why anyone would do this. This tyrant that Cinnamon described sounded like a creature from the darkest trench of the sea. She couldn't stop seeing the bodies of sea wings lying in the ruins. That could be her kingdom next. That could be the fate of her entire winglet. This tyrant had to be stopped. Once and for all. This was not a story about Ocean's personal glory. No. This was a fight for all dragons. All winglets. Ocean left what remained of the rock wings with a far clearer mind. The tyrant, above all, must die. Ocean and her loyalists began a counter-offensive into tyrant territory. At first, the tyrant's legions was taken off guard. A few victories belonged to Ocean, but they swiftly made pushbacks. But even at this point into the War of Unification, the tyrant was feeling the pinch of manpower. The tyrant's legions were fighting on 3 fronts: Claw Mountain, the incursion into the rainforest, and now an opposing army gathering momentum in their flanks? Ocean led by example. While her combat skill was limited, Ocean was always at the head of the assault. She never cowered away from the fight, a sight that made other dragons fight on even harder in her name. Ocean was able to inspire those around her by simply standing up in the heat of battle. Her willingness to put herself in harm's way wasn't always without fault. She suffered a few stab wounds here and lost a talent or two there. But her biggest scar would come from the Battle of the Gap. Late into the War of Unification, a passageway through Claw Mountain became a valuable strategic asset to both sides of the war. During the battle to take it, Ocean faced off with Legamite Quicksand. At this point, Ocean could hold her own in a fight, using her coral spear to land some effective blows on Quicksand. But she never could have predicted having a face full of flame. Quicksand boiled up a blast of sulfur that hit Ocean in the face. It bubbled and charred her scales, leaving her horribly disfigured. Such an injury left Ocean incapacitated. Only the careful and tender work of Rainwing apothecaries allowed her to heal in a timely manner. The left side of her face was a mess of torn meat and cooked flesh. She almost lost all feeling in her burns. Cracking a smile, that was hard enough. She lost all sight in her left eye, and on occasion felt unbearable pain shoot through her face. Her reunion with her loyalists, though, was one of a hero's welcome. Even Cinnamon had a newfound respect for the Sea-Wing Princess. Back at the head of her army, the Skywings surrendered. The Icewings did so as well, fatigued over the defense of their home. The tyrant's forces had been beaten back, displaced, and depleted from Pareena. Ocean and her loyalists could now march into the Mojave, and Ocean insisted to be at the head of that advance. The early battles within the Sandwing Kingdom was swift. Closer and closer Ocean got to Shady Sands, her prize, the home of the tyrant. As they marched closer and closer, what was left of the tyrant's legion fled or gave up. At the gate of Shady Sands, Ocean finally met Nevada, the Sandwing prince with big ambitions. Nevada was actually taken aback by the battered, scaled, and dirty visage of the Princess of the Sea-Wings. He admired her. Someone so young, so dedicated, so delicate, could be so strong-willed. When Ocean confronted the tyrant at first, she didn't get to say a word. But it didn't matter. She would be the one to kill the mad ruler. Cinnamon pulled him off his throne, and Nevada sanctioned the end of the Sandwing Kingdom. Ocean was kind of left a little empty. She had just spent 2 years of her life at war, seen and felt death and conflict. She had nightmares of what she has seen. Dragons tearing each other apart, tearing each other open. It wasn't clear to Ocean where she would go from here. Nevada met with Ocean. He had this grand plan, a single kingdom built for dragons by dragons, a grand utopia where all winglets came together and lived as one. No more war, no more hardship. Ocean kinda agreed. She had enough of war for one lifetime, and over the course of her campaign she met many dragons of different winglets. She has seen firsthand, without realizing it, what unity can do for dragons. It was worth a try, at least. So, Nevada made Ocean the first ruler of his new empire. At first, Ocean was doubtful, but yet again she had achieved so much and thus took the position with vigor and enthusiasm. But Nevada would need the appeal and approval of the other kingdoms. He needed their support to build this new empire, whether it was out of respect or fear. The other rulers agreed to Ocean's appointment, and thus, former Seawing Princess Oceana became the first Empress of the Empire of Pareena. At this meeting, Ocean came face to face with Queen Tidalwave, who was surprised her daughter was still alive. Tidalwave was very pleased that her daughter was now the greatest ruler in all of Pareena. That means the Sea Wings are on top. They now rule all of the continent. Something that Tidalwave was very eager to exploit out of her daughter. But Ocean told her mother her exact opinion of her. Tidalwave would keep her job as regent of the Tail Islands, but come the next imperial local election, Ocean will personally make sure her mother loses everything. Her mother would eventually lose her position of power, and in doing so, take her own life out of grief. Ocean's appointment as Empress of the Empire of Pareena was very popular among many of the dragons who knew of the scar-faced Seawing and her exploits. Yet, those few years after the War of Unification were not so smooth. Ocean's loyalists took up a position as police forces, cracking down on a loose set of ideals they called laws. Yet small pockets of the tyrant's legion remained at large, leading small, poorly organized offensives that stopped within a year. Dragons were still on edge. Sure, their kingdoms and rulers all followed the new Empress, Ocean, but other dragons had doubt. This new empire needed to prove it was better than any king or queen that came before. So Ocean led a new campaign. She would travel across her new empire as Nevada started to form the government. While out in the mass population of Pareena, Ocean handed out food, items of clothing, and other fascinating things looted from the Sandwing Kingdom. She wanted to build trust in her kin. She wanted to build hope in their new government. It was at this time Ocean introduced the 4 principles of the new empire. 4 ideals that any dragon could get behind. While, sure, Nevada did most of the heavy lifting, appointing the dragons needed, creating the first departments, and making sure everything goes as planned, Ocean was the figurehead that everyone loved. She ended the war, stopped the tyrant, and helped the unfortunate. But Ocean herself didn't shy away from contributing more, like the 4 principles, or the adoption of the imperial blue as the official color of the empire, or how Ocean worked closely with Cinnamon and Typhoon to create the first basis of the imperial army and the Custodii, an example of Ocean holding up one of her founding principles, upholding the sword. The first empress was paramount in the creation of the first schools of the empire, or how she basically pioneered the first imperial wedding. Which leaves Ocean and Nevada's relationship. They both grew an attachment to each other throughout the early days of the empire. They were both alike in interests and in goals. They would eventually have a single dragonet, a sandwing-seawing hybrid named Beachhead. She would become the second empress upon the death of Ocean. Ocean's approach to motherhood was unusual. She wanted her daughter to never make the same mistake that the tyrant or her mother, Tidalwave, did. Ocean kept her daughter close and taught her everything she could, even using mock examples like how Naval taught her. As the first recorded century grinded on, the first empress made great progress towards the betterment of all dragons. She oversaw the first elections of regional governments, the construction of the imperial palace, and the creation of services for dragons, by dragons, like the civil service. But as Ocean got older, she seemed to get sicker. Unfortunately, she began to suffer from cognitive decline. She frequently would soil herself and forget exactly who she is or what she is. She also went blind in her only good eye. It was hard for her family and close friends to her, like Cinnamon, to watch the eventual decline of such an important figure to the Empire. The first Empress would later die in 104. Nevada would give Ocean a traditional seawing burial, letting her drift off into the sea, to return her to where she came from. Of course, that's not the end of Ocean's legacy. She is, of course, remembered for her great deeds like stopping the tyrant, unifying Pareena, and making dragons' lives better. She is honored and remembered to this day in statues and in books. Fact enough, before her death, she wrote her own tome, documenting her life and that of the War of Unification, a first-hand account written by the Empress. The items that Ocean wore or carried were seen as prized relics. Her crown was passed down to the next Imperator, her daughter. Same with her jewels, as it is now done for every Imperator. Her spear, the coral spear, was kept on display in the palace's relic room, but it would see war once again during the Hive Wars. So, in conclusion, the first Empress came from simple beginnings, a mere young sea-wing looking for fame in the world. It turns out, she would be the host to a much greater responsibility. She would set the benchmark that every dragon after her will aspire to be determined, to be confident, to be compassionate, yet brutal. It wouldn't be far from the truth to say that the first Empress Ocean is the physical personification of all that is the Empire of Pareena. And that concludes another episode of the Wings of Fire spin-off series, Empire of Pareena. Thank you very much for listening. I've been your host, Heatwave, signing off.